Thank you for auditing the Always Positive New Music Review Show hosted by a French professor who's doing something different today. So I'm teaching this class on hip hop, and I'm tackling the question of white rappers, and more specifically, white people in hip hop culture. And I think it's interesting. I had my students read a lot of this book, okay, by Bakari Kitwana, Why White Kids Love Hip Hop. It's a great book, a great resource, a great work of originality, and a great work of synthesis. Really, excellent book. And I also studied some YouTube videos and just sort of took my personal history, and I'm trying to create a sort of way for my students, to understand ways of thinking about whiteness in rap music. So I'm going to just show you the PowerPoint. Like, I recorded a PowerPoint and I recorded a lecture, and I'm going to be sending that to them to watch. And I'm just going to be taking out the music, because if I include the music, then it gets demonetized. It'll actually be blocked in all countries because Universal Music Group will come after me with the copyright goblins. And there's a real chance that the video will never be seen. So I'm going to be doing that. So enjoy this class right here, and tell me what you think at the end of it. Smash the like button and subscribe. For people talk about me being vulnerable, and I am vulnerable. When I talk about things like my family or whatever, my dad dying and all that stuff. It's actually much more vulnerable to show you my classes. Like, this is real vulnerability, because this is my life. This is my corn. You know what I mean? Like, teaching is my corn. If I were a farmer, and so I'm showing you my corn. So, bonjour class. Well, hi class. So let's get to it, right? Let's get to today's class. It's going to be fairly deep. It's going to be fairly interesting, fairly introspective. We're going to start briefly off with the final word on Kendrick, and then we are going to talk about whiteness, or whiteness, depending on how you want to pronounce it. So as far as Kendrick goes, we're going to come back to Kendrick. We're going to talk about his last album later on in the semester. Towards the end, we're going to be talking about the song Father Time. But for now, I just want to remind you of an important element that I really wanted to emphasize from the song Blacker the Berry, which is about American society loving Black culture but hating Black people. I say that that's important, and if this were a class, I would have you get together and get in little groups and explain how that's true, why he's saying it, how he's saying it. But for now, just sort of, put a pin in that idea about American society loving Black culture but hating Black people. Because as we talk about white participation in a Black art, obviously that is a way to have Black culture without having to confront Black people. So it's very thematically consistent with our previous class. But that's not the only way that I'm trying to connect these things. It's not the only way I'm trying to connect the Kendrick class and the White Rappers class, because I've also been asking you this question for the last week. Who is the 21st century rap king? Rap is a competitive art, okay? Unlike any other art in the world, it is competitive by nature, not by chance. So who is the true king of 21st century rap? Is it Kanye West? Son of a... Is it Drake? Is it Kendrick? Or is it Eminem? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to try to see what are the ways that we could call Eminem the king of 21st century rap. And again, my son told me that he would never forgive me if I said that at the conclusion of all of it that Eminem was the king. But let's just get into it, okay? Let's study it. Let's think about it. Let's think about why that's an upsetting idea, why that's a troubling idea, with just getting into this question of whiteness. You should be able to recognize the guy on the left. We've already studied him. That's Vanilla Ice, one of the 30 people who's killed hip hop over the past 50 years. And to the right is Eminem, the most requested rap artist by this class, and wasn't even close. So I asked all of my students, I asked all of you, what song would you like me to treat? And by far, Rap God by Eminem got the most votes, and Eminem as an artist got the most votes. So you know who Eminem is, you know who Vanilla Ice is, and let's talk about whiteness. Now, first of all, the mere fact that we have to talk about, or that we're choosing to talk about, whiteness in rap is in and of itself a victory for diversity in culture. Okay. Most often in our culture, there is a default. Okay. And that default is white, cis, male. Okay. White, straight, cis, male. That the default in life, that when you think of a person, when you think of a hero, when you think of a fire person, when you think of a mailman, when you think of a president, when you, whatever it is, there is the idea of the default. And that creates what scholars call alterity, the sense of being other if you are not cis, white, hetero male. Okay. And I'm saying that as a cis, white, hetero male. So I benefit from whatever weird privilege that is. The fact that whiteness is what we are searching to define shows the fact that hip hop has not yet been taken from Black America. Okay. Not like rock and roll has, which we'll be coming back to. Okay. We are going to be constantly going back to the book that I had you read for today. Our passage is from by Bakari Kitwana, a great scholar and writer about hip hop. This was his book, Why White Kids Love Hip Hop. And this one line I think is very important. To begin with, it must be stated unequivocally that hip hop is a subculture of Black American youth culture, period. I love the certainty of this, and I think this is something that we just need to remember and keep in our heads. This quote. Okay. Notice this quote is not a judgmental quote. It is not defining it by what it's not. It is simply saying that hip hop is a subculture of Black American youth culture. And it is. Now, rock and roll started off as a subculture of Black American youth culture. It no longer is. Hip hop is a subculture of Black American youth culture, period. When we think about whiteness in hip hop, we sort of divide it into two different ways, consumers and creators. And I had you read a lot of things in this excellent book by Kitwana, excuse me. Makes it sound like a Japanese name, by Bakari Kitwana, between consumers and creators. Okay, so as consumers, here's just a great image. I think that's Joey Badass at a concert. If you've ever been to a rap concert, you will notice that the majority of people in the crowd are white. That's been true since I went to my first rap concert in 1991. And it was true when I went to my last rap concert a couple months ago, right? So consumers, all right. As consumers, I think we can say that there's sort of this initial idea. And what I really liked about this book is that it really challenged this concept that 80% of all people who purchase rap music are white boys or white men, right? It is probably true that a statistical majority of purchasers of rap music are white. But that is a statistical question of living in a country where the statistical majority of people are white. This emphasis that it's so heavily skewed towards white consumers is a lie and the truth at the same time. It is true that it's a majority, but it's a lie that it's this gigantic, huge, disproportionate amount. As is pointed out in this book, there is no actual hard data. The data that we're counting on is fairly fuzzy. And yet that statistic is thrown out over and over again because that statistic supports a narrative. So what's the good side of the white hip hop consumer? Of course, it's supporting Black culture. Okay, great. And by the way, sometimes I capitalize white and black and sometimes I don't. nothing intentional on that. It actually bugs me. I'm going to go back and fix it after I go through this slide. I just created these slides last night. So, supporting Black culture, it shows empathy with Black people. It comes from a different place than where most people are from. It comes from communities that are not usually from. And by listening to the art, by listening to the words, we are connecting with people in a way that we haven't connected. If you want a better example of that, how have you ever connected with, say, a Native American who lives on a reservation? How have you participated in their lives? Have you exposed yourself to any of their culture, or has their culture ever been exposed to you? Do you know, for example, that in Navajo reservation, they eat this fried bread? I went there once. A friend of mine was a doctor in the reservation. And, that's the kind of stuff that I learned just by going there. Okay. But this sharing of what's happening good and bad, in the Black community to white consumers does actually produce, for the most part, a better society. And ultimately, it serves to undermine white supremacy. That's the hope. That's the positive side of it. But of course, there's the bad side. And one reason why this is such a good book is the way it synthesizes a lot of other people's thoughts, such as Usman and Crouch. Those aren't one article, those are two separate articles by two separate scholars. It is Black trauma for white entertainment. It's very complicated. That's something that I think all white consumers of hip hop need to struggle with, to make sure that this is not just some kind of, when I'm thinking about myself, especially when I was 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old, listening to Eazy-E, talking about the life he's living, the kind of crimes that he's doing, the kind of trauma he's inflicting, the violence that he lives in. Is it not just sort of a way for me to exoticize and other people who are the same, right? Who are human beings like me? Of course, there's the issue that a lot of rap reinforces stereotypes and therefore supports white supremacy. In particular, the rap that sells the best, the rap that is most successful, has rampant amounts of materialism, drug use, misogyny, hypersexuality, violence, all of these negative images being pushed back at them, right? I mean, pushed back to a white audience. So this is the complexity. And I don't think that it's up to us to solve this question, but I do think it is up to us to understand that it is a question, and that there is ambiguity about the white consumer of hip hop, myself very much included. But let's talk about creators. Sorry, I should have warned you there's a Post Malone slide coming up. The way I want to think about hip hop creators, and the great thing is you can pause this now. It's not like in class, you can pause my slides. So the folks who think I go too fast, you can always pause me. It's a nice advantage. So I'm going to be talking about white hip hop artists sort of in two different places in hip hop and fulfilling two different roles. And sometimes they are in both places, and sometimes, as we will see, they perform both roles. So what are these places and what are these roles? Well, as far as places go, there's behind the scenes and in the limelight. Okay, the white people in hip hop that you see and those that don't. And here's where I'm going to get a little controversial here. I would say the two roles, roughly, if we are remembering that hip hop is a subculture of Black American youth culture. Okay, we understand that. Then we can think about white creators as being somewhere on the spectrum between a vampire and a blood donor. Vampire, I mean somebody who extracts, someone who sucks the lifeblood, somebody who uses someone else in a parasitic fashion to get what they can out of them. Whereas a blood donor is somebody who gives of themselves. And when I'm talking about, like, this isn't actually like sucking the blood out of, like, actual people. It's more the culture, hip hop culture, rap music culture. Okay, this set of practices and beliefs that is embodied in rap music that comes from African American youth culture, right? That the vampires will just take what they can from it and then leave without giving anything back. Whereas the blood donor, and I'm sorry, it's kind of a gross image, but it's evocative, gets the people going. The idea of a blood donor is that, there's investment. You're not just taking, you're giving. You are invested. Your sense of who you are as a person, you understand that you have a responsibility to the culture, to the blood bank. God, that's a really gross image. It gets better. I'm going to stop saying blood really soon. So who are the behind the scenes people? Well, there's beat makers, there's producers, sometimes the same person, there's the people who own the label. There's a whole bunch of people in the music industry in between the artist and the label maker. And of course, there are scholars like me. There are those who are in the limelight. That's mainly rappers or any behind the scenes person who becomes famous. Some behind the scenes people attain a certain amount of fame and notoriety. Okay, they end up going from behind the scenes to the limelight. An interesting thing about being in the limelight in hip hop culture and in rap music is that it is initially more difficult at least in the olden days, and still to a certain extent these days, to obtain any respect. But once that respect is obtained, the path to superstardom is much easier and much quicker. And for that, I'll go back to it. I'll explain a little bit further. But there is an excellent video on People's Party with Talib Kweli on LP and white rappers where they go into this theory. They come up with this theory that's like a rocket ship. And like the rocket ship, it's hard to take off. But once white rappers take off, they're not meant for the stratosphere. They're going straight off to the moon. You know what I mean? Whereas black rappers are more likely to get that credibility, to get that start, but they're less likely to break out of the stratosphere into superstardom. It's a great video. I suggest watching it. We'll come back to it later too. So, what is a vampire? Well, the most important aspect of a vampire is profiting from black art without properly recognizing black people. This is where we are going back to that Kendrick Lamar quote. You hate me, don't you? Right? All from Blacker the Berry. The idea of hating black people while using black art, properly recognizing black people for creating the art, or properly understanding that a white person making a black art needs to address that in the creation of the art itself. Okay? So that's one way one's a vampire. Often there's a question of inauthenticity of a sort of vampire person, where someone is able to pretend that they are something that they are not. I mean, when we think about Vanilla Ice trying to pretend like he was a gangster when he very much wasn't. There's an intense amount of greed because there's so much money in rap music. Vampires are often greedy. Now you might be saying, oh, but rappers are greedy, aren't they? And it's true, most rappers are greedy. But if you are a Black American making rap music, it is music from your culture that represents your culture. So you're not taking in, again, to quote Kendrick Lamar, Kendrick Lamar referred to himself and he said, he's called himself I am culture. That was his quote describing the end of Blacker the Berry. He's saying, I'm not speaking for the culture, I am the culture. And that is the thing which a lot of white participants in hip hop can't understand, is forcibly, no matter what, they can't be the culture, even if they can contribute to the culture. So this kind of greed. Often the term culture vulture will be thrown around, somebody who preys on a culture without treating it with proper respect. And in general, I would define as somebody who takes more than they give. Just as a spoiler alert, at the end of this class, I'm going to refer to YouTuber Jake Paul. That's a good example. Or Logan Paul. I forget which one. Maybe both of them do rap videos. And it's a great example of using rap not for anything having to do with Black culture at all, but just purely as a way to create something that kids like and sounds hip and cool. And you just take it and you divorce it of all of its deeper meaning, all of its cultural context, and just take from it and use that form to profit. There's a whole group of sort of YouTubers and influencer culture where I would say fits into this category. But what about the blood donors? The more positive side, these are people who give to the culture. These are people who invest in the culture. That's really a word that I like to use, where they aren't just doing it because it's convenient. They do it because it is true. And it makes it true, authentic to themselves, that they have found a way that hip hop expresses their feelings and their emotions. And that's how I feel. This class is a creation on my part. It's me being very authentic to something I'm passionate about, trying to better understand my country, trying to better understand my culture, trying to better understand the people with whom I live in this country and in this world, and that's the idea. It's that it's not doing it because it's easy or because it's successful, but because it is a need, which is all great art comes from that need to express. Very importantly, blood donors recognize whiteness and its privileges. I understand that the term white privilege is considered to be a political sentiment. It is as political as gravity. So you can say there's no guarantee that if I drop an apple off my porch that it's going to hit the ground. But that is how questionable white privilege is as it exists in a systematic way. Okay. And I'm not going to sit here and litigate all of that. If that is something you'd like to discuss, I am open to discuss it. But I'm open to discuss it in class. Okay. Like seriously, as a matter of fact, if you'd like to discuss it, if you'd like to discuss it, please like write me an anonymous note and just leave it somewhere in the class and I'll find it and we'll have more of a discussion about it. Because I don't want anyone to think that there is no discussion to be had. But at the same time, I don't want it to be seen as a question. It's not a question. The blood donor often shares privilege, takes the gifts that were given to them and shares them with people who do not have that privilege. Now, I want this to be very clear. This is not a question of a white savior, okay? Being given power that you did not earn and then sharing that power is not generosity, okay? It's not. It's not. Okay, that's sort of the minimum thing that you can do if you participate in a culture, is to share with people who have less than you do for no reason other than birth. Very important is, in order to have a space and to be seen as being valuable as a white creator in hip hop, you must invent. It is not enough to just participate. One must invent, create, add something to the culture. Otherwise, you are just a person who is not of the culture profiting from the culture, if you are not in some way trying to create. And of course, you're a participant. That's a stupid one. So the real question is, here's a picture of Elvis, king of rock and roll. Can and will rap music be stolen from the Black community? I'm going to answer that question. There's an answer, by the way. There is an answer. Will it be stolen the way rock and roll was? The way if I tell you, hey, think of a rock and roll artist, the first 50 people you think of are probably white guys from England. How did this all happen? That's another class. Will rap suffer the same fate? Now let's actually start talking about white rappers. Hey, what white person that we've already studied? Do you even remember? Yeah, I'm really excited. I don't know, class, if you would know this. I don't, but do you remember Blondie? Debbie Harry from Blondie in Rapture? She was the first person that we studied. And I think this is an interesting case to start off on, because but no, stop. We're not going to watch Blondie. This is an interesting question. No, I said we're not going to watch Blondie. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble with my PowerPoint here. Is she a vampire or is she a blood donor? On the one hand, she's a vampire. She's this, young woman, and she's using her white privilege to sort of go down and slum around and find all these hip hop artists and take their art and use it to make herself seem more interesting, more vital, more hip and young and with it. But on the other hand, she actually connected with actual artists. She supported them. She gave them a platform. She went to bat for the Funky 4+1 and made sure that they were the first rap group to perform on Saturday Night Live. She is a perfect way to start. Oh, geez, I'm gonna have to pause it because once Toby starts barking, it's. Hey, Toby, could you please stop barking, bud? Like whatever that is. Okay, I'm back. Toby stopped barking. So Blondie, I think, is a great example how very often, I think the reality is some combination of the two, that white participants both take from the culture and give to it. And that way it ends up being, instead of parasitic or simply an act of giving, it ends up being symbiotic, which is the best way, some give and take at the same time. But they're not, I'm just goofing around. We're not going to talk that much about Blondie. We're, of course, going to talk about the Beastie Boys, the first major white rap group. There they are. Some of the most important musicians to me in my life when I was younger. One of the few bands that every single person I knew liked at least one of their albums, if not two of their albums. Let's study why. Where do they fit in this whole zone? Okay. The first major white rap group, the Beastie Boys, three Jewish boys from Brooklyn and Manhattan. I do think it is important, their ethnicity, because it is a underrepresented ethnicity in popular music. I do think that culturally they are able to relate to hip hop in a way that is different than if they were not Jewish. I believe. I mean, there's plenty of excellent articles out there about Jewishness and the Beastie Boys, and especially sort of their influence on young boys and young Jewish people who were growing up at this time. I had no idea. I didn't even, to be honest, I didn't even understand what a Jewish person was, what a Catholic person was, what a Protestant was. I didn't know the differences between those things until I was like 25. Oh no, it must have been in college. So anyway, I didn't understand that, but this is an important element to part of what they're able to do, which is to say, if hip hop is universal, and we've already learned that hip hop is universal with our international rap presentations, it can be a voice for the voiceless, or at least a voice for the less heard. So, but it's important that they started their life as a punk band. That's how they started, playing their own instruments and being a punk band. They released a kind of joke rap song, and then they go full rap. And again, once they got on, they were on a rocket ship to the moon. Their first album was produced at Def Jam and was produced by Rick Rubin. Do you remember Rick Rubin? We've talked about Rick Rubin before, but Rick Rubin, I think, is one of these great behind the scenes type figures who I think really shows a lot of sometimes the unseen presence of producers, of white participants in hip hop. I would call him the first major white rap producer. He isn't the first in general, but I'd say the first major one. Again, culturally, ethnically Jewish from Long Island. And in college, he realized rap is the new punk. He hadn't met Beastie Boys yet, but he realized that whatever the power was in the youth that led them to love punk, that was the same thing that would get them to love rap music. So he starts a label. He starts a rap label in his New York University dorm room with Russell Simmons. We've already discussed this. It's Def Jam Recordings, the biggest rap record label of all time. Now, we studied it primarily from the Russell Simmons side of it, him being related to the guys in Run DMC and how they started their whole career. But it is important just to remember that Rick Rubin is there, behind the scenes. His innovation, his dedication, when we talk about LL Cool J, we listen to LL Cool J. He produced LL Cool J's albums as well. He is somebody who really helped to push rap forward. He was really somebody who understood how to reach the most people in rap music, and it wasn't exclusively by making it packaged for white people. He knew that he could do something with the art and used his effort, used his talent, used his genius to push it out there. And of course, now he's Red Hot Chili Peppers and Slayer and Johnny Cash and Kanye West. If you like My Dark Twisted Fantasy, he helped to produce a lot of that. If you have 99 Problems, that's thanks to Rick Rubin. A lot of Tom Petty's late stuff. Adele, Audioslave, The Strokes, Neil Young. He's done a lot of stuff. And there he is right there in the middle. There's not a lot of pictures that I've seen of Rick Rubin back in the day with Beastie Boys. And we really need to talk about their first album, Licensed to Ill, from 1986. As a child of the 80s, I can tell you this is one of those albums that basically everybody had. And it was the first rap album to go platinum. No, it wasn't. It wasn't. First rap album to go platinum was Run DMC's Raising Hell, which was also produced by Rick Rubin. Again, behind the scenes. Okay. When I listened to Raising Hell as a kid, I didn't think, oh, wow, this is great work by Rick Rubin. I thought this is great Run DMC, right? It's that symbiotic relationship where they're working together. But it was the first rap album, Beastie Boys Licensed to Ill, to go to #1 on the Billboard charts. It was the best-selling rap album of the 1980s. Now, the question is it authentic? Well, yes and no, because it's three young friends being goofy, talking about drinking and girls and loving rap music and using their own voice, and it was. But on the other hand, like if they could go from punk to rap, it was sort of taking hip hop almost like a costume, like they were going out for Halloween. But let's study their style in depth with the song that I had you listen to for today's class, Paul Revere, a personal favorite, one of my songs. Now, first of all, as we will hear, it uses backwards 808s. Okay, the drum machine put backwards. And this is what I'm talking about. In order to give back to the culture, it is not enough just to do the culture. You have to add to it. You have to innovate. And they did. What else does this song? We're not going to look at a picture of Paul Revere. What else does this song show? The fictional story of the founding of the band, just like three guys who meet and hang out, and has this amazing interplay between them. In a way, the Beastie Boys are overrated, and in a way, they're underrated. I think they are underrated as a group that really had an amazing flow between them, where their three voices went together because they so clearly were friends who were together and making music together and made music together forever. It was almost like they were passing off, like they were obsessed with basketball, and they're sort of like a team. There's like a basketball thing called a three-man weave. Injury Reserve has a song about that. Speaking of interesting white people in rap music, they're not on my later list. They should be. Anyways, like they had that sort of ease in the way they go between. They use their authentic voice, they use their authentic accents. They are not putting on what is called in these days a black scent. They're not trying to sound other than the way that they are. They're talking about beer, they're talking about parties. We could sort of call this frat rap. So let's listen to the song. Now, hopefully, I will be able to upload this song. Hopefully, I will be able to upload this to Brightspace. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to. But why don't we just listen to it just for a second? We don't even need to listen to the lyrics, but just to get a sense of this awesome backwards 808, the sound of the voice, about beer and about looking for girls and all that. And they have this really great, easy back and forth, right? But this super rad song, and again, that backwards 808 just sounds so good. Kanye sampled it on the song he did with The Game from last year. This rad song is not what made the album explode, okay? I gotta be honest with you. What really put rap on the map, I mean, really, really, really exploded rap music into the American living room, was this song, Fight for Your Right. And much like you saw with Public Enemy, Fight the Power, this is a song that is all about the need to find injustice and fight against it and fight for your rights in this cruel Reaganomics world where the rich get richer and the poor get... Oh, no. That's not what the song is about. You got to read the parentheses, Sky. You got to read the parentheses. You got to fight for your right to party. That's what the song is about. Okay? This was the song that was absolutely everywhere. I was alive during Ice Ice Baby. I was alive during Fight for Your Right. I was alive during You Can't Touch This. And I was alive during In My Feelings. Okay? Nothing. Fight for Your Right was absolutely everywhere. Every annoying kid in my middle school knew this song. And this was the image from the video. This was the image that they were presenting. This was what they were talking about. This was what really broke through and reached into the living room and made sure that everybody loved rap music. Not just white kids who were cool with some black music, but everybody when they heard this song, because what did it do? What did this song do? Well, it has Rick Rubin's award-winning formula. Okay, the guy from Slayer is playing guitar in the song. Slayer, the heavy metal group, and rap. He did the same thing a couple more times. Okay, as recently as 99 Problems. Okay, very catchy, very stupid frat boy rap. Okay, there is a large population of rap fans who are just young, dumb men of all colors. Okay, there's just a large population, not exclusively, but there's a large population. And this really reached to the same boys and young men who would react positively to heavy metal like Aerosmith or something, are now realizing, wait a minute, or punk, right? Here's a new form of music that allows me to have these feelings. And you think it's about injustice, but it's not. It's about having strict parents. Man, living at home is such a drag. Now, your mom threw away your best porno mag. This is about the difficulties of white suburban adolescent life, which is why it was so successful in the white adolescent suburbs, which is why I knew the song so well, which is why it was so big. Now, it's interesting because this is creation. This is something new, right? There weren't like popular rap songs at the time that were talking about such banal things, right? And it was hugely influential, this song and this album. Let's talk about the influence of this album. First of all, of course, on white kids and culture. It taught white kids in general. I would say it taught perhaps Jewish kids in specific. For those who knew that they were Jewish and who were Jewish themselves, I happen to, like I've known many people in my adult life who told me that the Beastie Boys allowed them to feel cool in a way that nothing else in culture had ever allowed them to feel cool. And I just had no idea, right? But white kids in general and culture, there is a place. There is a place to be. And for white rappers, there is a way to make it. And then for pop rappers, suburban life can be a subject. Parents just don't understand. We already studied that song. Parents just don't understand, wouldn't have worked, or they wouldn't have known that would have worked unless you had Fight for Your Right to Party. Should we listen to Fight for Your Right to Party? Yeah. Okay, we're going to listen. Sorry, I forgot. We're going to watch the video too, actually, just while we're here, to give you an idea of that frat rap style. Is going to have a lot of problems with consent and with general behavior. Okay. But what we're seeing is the punk attitude, the devil may care style attitude of punk music and heavy metal music now being set to a rap beat. Get to the part until here. So, oh, wait, actually, you can see Rick Rubin's in here too. 1 second. Where's Rick Rubin? Let's see. There, yeah, there's Rick Rubin. I think he gets a pie to the face later, doesn't he? Anyways, you've probably heard the song before. You've maybe even heard it a lot. So we've talked about its influence. We've talked about its influence, but there's another way that it was really influential. And this is something which I haven't heard a lot of people mention, but is very important. A lot of West Coast rap, I believe, this is one of my theories, owes a lot to Public Enemy. I mean, to Beastie Boys. Well, Public Enemy as well, but to Beastie Boys. If you listen to Ice Cube's early rap, like before he was in NWA, he just sounds like he is copying Beastie Boys entirely. Like it's bizarre. It's like the most copied style I've heard. And it sounds obscene to say that and offensive. I feel offended just saying these words because I'm talking about a black artist stealing from a white artist who is performing a black art, right? Like, how does that all work? How does that all go together? I don't know what to tell you, bud. That's just how it ends up working. And if you listen to the first album by NWA, of course, there's a huge Public Enemy influence, but there's also a huge Beastie Boys influence. I would say that without License to Ill, there probably wouldn't have been an NWA, or they wouldn't have been the same way. And I understand that's offensive. That is offensive. But when we think about the soundscape, they sample Beastie Boys a lot. They do. Beer drinking, breath thinking, sniffing, glue, just as one small example. But then also this attitude. It was as though Dr. Dre and the rest of them understood that they could adopt this kind of bratty, fratty attitude, but mix it with the West Coast gangster lifestyle and the authenticity of the streets and all that. I really think these things kind of dovetailed together, and that Beastie Boys paved the way for NWA. Again, this sounds offensive because I'm talking about white artists paving the way for black artists in an art that is a subculture of black youth culture. Okay. But I think if you look at it neutrally, I think you can see it that way. And I think seeing it that way is more interesting because it's more of an interplay between people. It's a more of a reflection of American culture in general, of the back and forth, of what is sometimes a symbiotic relationship. It's not always purely parasitic. So were they vampires? Yeah. They took black art, made it white, and sold it to a white audience. Sure. Were they blood donors? Yeah. They were innovative and authentic, and they greatly popularized the genre for the mainstream. It's hard to tell what would have happened to rap music if the Beastie Boys didn't break through. Would it have eventually taken over as the number one genre in the world and in the country? It's hard to tell. Now, it's interesting, and to their credit, Beastie Boys are real artists. So their second album is a total flop. It just did not sell well at all. And it makes sense it didn't sell well because it's completely awesome. I mean, it's so good. It's so good I could just spend 3 classes, just break just the sample usage. Just they worked with the Dust Brothers, who also did the soundtrack to Fight Club. If you want to get super into 90s culture as well, like the way that they innovated. So they were like, along with like De La Soul and Tribe Called Quest, they were sort of part of this East Coast innovative alternative rap wave that was largely based on creativity in sampling and different styles of themes, different themes than crime narratives, different themes than civil rights, just sort of a different style of rapping. So Paul's Boutique has this huge influence on rap music, despite the fact it wasn't a big hit. And then they go on to make 2 more albums, Check Your Head and No Communication. And this is where I would say, class, I would say, hey, what do you notice on the left? What are they sitting on? They're sitting on their instruments. This is their other major contribution. Their third and fourth albums, they played all their own instruments. So it's one thing to do like, rock and rap together, right? Like we've studied it a little bit, right? But it's another thing to be rock musicians who are also rap musicians and doing them at the same time. That makes it authentic as opposed to hiring a guitar player or hiring a drummer. You are actually using rap music to communicate your rock and roll spirit, which is ultimately what they ended up doing. It's this further mixture of punk and rap. And what happened was they became alternative music stars. Okay. They became like Nirvana, like Pearl Jam, like Soundgarden. When you said, I like the Beastie Boys, you weren't saying, I love hip hop. You were saying, I love alternative music. And this is an interesting time. This was the first time in my life I ever got mad at somebody for liking music that I liked. And I said, I don't really like rap music, but I like the Beastie Boys. And I just got so mad because I read that as being racial. And to a certain extent, it is. But to a different extent, it's that they sort of created their own genre. I also, once someone said something to me in high school, I don't like rap except for G Love and Special Sauce, which is that is like saying I don't like rap music, but I do like Fruity Pebbles. To go to a deep cut from this class. So, we'll listen to just a little bit of maybe the most successful song from this era of Beastie Boys, Sabotage, a song which you have heard 1,000 times, and a music video which was the first of its kind to do a sort of intentional throwback. The way they dressed up, the way they're working now, we see this kind of pastiche imitation of music videos, of older aesthetics all the time. But when the Beastie Boys did this and released this song on MTV, it completely blew everybody's mind. So let's just listen to a little bit. You'll hear, oh, that's my phone. I have to answer this actually. So pause share. How do I stop the recording? So that was an innovation, but we'll just listen to it briefly and hear the punk sound and the rap sound, the whole thing. I'm not going to. Okay, so the question is, are the Beastie Boys Elvis? Did they steal rock and roll? Did they become the kings of rap music because they were the best-selling rap artists of rap's first major decade, the 1980s? Not really. They didn't. They didn't really steal it. They didn't take it away. Somehow, hip-hop music and rap survived megastars being white. They somehow did it. How? How is it possible that rap was not stolen at this point? It only took a couple white superstars in rock and roll to completely supplant black musicians. How did this not happen with white music? Well, it's not that there's a lack of vampires. These are my four favorite vampires. You ever notice how Count Chocula only has the teeth that you can't use to suck blood? He doesn't have the canines. He's like a reverse vampire. Is that like a chocolate thing? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. This is not a class about Count Chocula. But what about the vampires? Like, there must be vampires around because I can't just paint this rosy picture of the Beastie Boys being successful and yay and being loved and moving on. And no, okay. Obviously, there were vampires. There was Vanilla Ice. There was Marky Mark, who we've already studied. But the question is, that we have to understand is, why didn't they survive as rap artists? Why did one of them disappear into obscurity? And why did the other one have to become an actor? Because they didn't actually have the support of the culture. They actually needed the culture to thrive. They had all the mechanisms of the record companies, of white supremacy, meaning that the art would be taken and packaged and turned into something that was more acceptable to a white audience. All those things are true. All those things are true. They couldn't survive without the culture. They couldn't. They sucked the blood and they ran out and they disappeared. So these guys, like when we think about these guys, Vanilla Ice and Marky Mark, we might think that they are the kinds of people that the white rappers are the ones who make the most money from rap music. But when we talk about vampires, we really have to go behind the scenes. We really have to go and understand something like the corporate structure, okay? The corporate structure of record companies, their parent companies, and their shareholders, okay? Because they are the people who are making the most money, okay? They are the people who make the most money off of rap music. And, if we just go here and if we just look at Universal Music Group, who owns Capitol Records, who owns EMI, who owns Interscope, which owns Shady, which owns Aftermath, which owns, all the music made by Eminem and Dr. Dre, which owns Def Jam, which owns Island, which owns Motown. So we're talking all of Public Enemy, all of Bob Marley, all of Smokey Robinson, plus Polydor, plus Virgin Music Group, plus Abbey Roads, plus Boominati. Wow, there's Deutsche Grammophon. That's all owned in there. We're talking Mercury Records as well. Quality Control Music. Remember when we did that whole thing about Atlanta and about how all those great Atlanta rap artists were founded, and we had the Strictly Business Minute all about the beginning of Atlanta rap? Well, ultimately, all goes to the shareholders and board members of Universal and Shady Records, okay, and EXO, The Weeknd, and Young Money. And Young Money, and Lil Wayne, and Drake. And then that's just one record company that all of the money goes up to Universal. Universal, who just produced the Super Mario Bros. Movie, which I enjoyed the hell out of. But fundamentally, a Lil Wayne album and a Jay-Z album are a product like a Super Mario Bros. Movie. And the people who get all the money, who get most of the money, are the people at the top. And systematic generational inequality has resulted in the fact that the vast majority of the people at the top of every corporate pyramid are white men. That is a statistical fact. It is changing, which is great. There's much more diversity, much more representation, much more access to education. We are working towards a world where hopefully in 100 years, it will not be this way. Hopefully Jay-Z and Beyonce's son or daughter, I don't know. Hopefully Jay-Z and Beyonce's daughter gets an MBA from Harvard and ends up running Universal Music at the highest level. Okay, that's the hope that we have to have for the kind of change that we need to see. But as of now, this is the greatest vampire that exists. And this exists in all art forms. This isn't just rap music. This is all culture that's fundamentally going up some pyramid to somebody at the top. Sorry, I just looked up on the internet Mario vampire, and I found this. I don't know what I don't know. I love the internet. But then, of course, I think it's important to remember that behind the scenes, there are also many, many white participants in hip hop who are not seen, who give a lot. I mean, you read about Dave Myers, the guy, I mean, Dave Mays, the guy who owns and runs The Source. You read about him in kind of a weird way, in the way that he was in constant competition with Eminem and all that, but still a very important person who took his privilege of going to Harvard, of being somebody who had access to power and money, and used that to create something that helped hip hop culture, right? Or Raucous Records, one of the most important underground record companies that was the cradle of backpack rap, which allowed a lot of rap artists who were representing underrepresented parts of Black society to have a wider audience. Okay? Of course, Scott Storch, Dr. Dre's co-producer in the Chronic 2001. So much of what we love about Dr. Dre can go there. There are characters like this all over the place. Even though I'm talking about black and white, it really is not a black and white situation in a culture this rich in money, but really rich in talent and beauty. Why did I put the slide back in here? Oh, I know why, because it's really important that you remember that he said that. So you watched the video too. You watched the video by Hip Hop Madness, right? That talked about Insta rappers and the internet. The important thing to understand about white rappers is that before the internet, there was a specific difficulty in making it. Okay. So they made it just by getting some suit in some office said these guys will work. They were created by the studio to work to just be a product that will sell. Okay. But other than that, you have to make it past the gatekeepers of hip hop, who have been and will presumably always be African American men in America, right? That's probably always going to be the case. The people who created the culture will serve, the people from whence the culture comes will serve as the gatekeepers of the culture. Does it make sense? I think it does. So in order to get past the gatekeeper, there's a couple things you needed to do, at least before the internet. You needed a cosign, you needed support from a respected member of the culture. You had to be authentic to your origin and say who you were and not pretend to be somebody that you weren't. And you had to bring something new, whether the way that you rapped, the way that you produced, how you presented yourself, the things that you rapped about, the people that you represented. That is what had to be new. So another example that I had you listen to was House of Pain, the song Jump Around, a perfect example, co-signed by Ice-T and Cypress Hill. They represented a different group of people, Irish American people from a working class background. I grew up outside of Boston. I still don't understand how these guys aren't from Boston. They wore Larry Bird jerseys. Like, to tell you that my Irish American classmates saw themselves in these rappers is an understatement. And to a certain extent, they were a voice of the voiceless. Now, not the completely voiceless. That's not to say that Irish Americans suffer the same kind of prejudice or actively suffer the same kind of prejudice in the same amount or the same severity as people of other ethnicities, but definitely, and I can tell you, growing up in Boston, it is a group which does have historical roots in oppression and prejudice. And here we had people using this voice of the voiceless art form to express themselves. You know, we'll take a second to watch a little bit of this, just so you can kind of see and see the guy in his Celtics jersey. Ooh, they're playing the Hawks, aren't they? I hope they win the video, because what's important is that all of the signs that they're showing. They're not wearing gold chains. They're not sitting in front of BMWs. They're not trying to hang out in front of a project. They're showing themselves participating in Irish American traditions. And even though the beat itself is made by the guy, DJ Muggs from Cypress Hill, still, like, the whole feeling that's here is totally different than other rap music, and it's authentic to itself. And the sound that was also sampled by Public Enemy is here used to sound like a bagpipe. And so everything leads us to Eminem, the best-selling rapper in history, with over 200 million records sold. The sixth best-selling solo music artist of all time, growing up in Detroit, starting his rap career at 16. First ever hip hop artist to win an Oscar. He's won so many Grammys. He's won so many things. And how do we get here? And what does Eminem mean? What does he mean? What is the meaning of Eminem? How did he make it past the gatekeepers? Did he have a cosign? Yes. Thanks to happenstance, he ended up having his tape arrive in the hands of Dr. Dre, who was smart enough to spot the talent to sign him. What did he have that was authentic? He talked about growing up white and poor in the Midwest in a trailer park where he grew up, and that was something which had not been expressed. That was a voiceless voice that was now voiced through hip hop. Did he bring something new? Themes, attitude, and style. Those things that he brought were unique to him. He was not trying to be Black or trying to be anything other than who he was. And he did that through themes, attitude, and style. So let's take his opening song. Okay, his first single, My Name Is, his debut single. All right. Produced by Dr. Dre 6 years after he produced Snoop's What's My Name. Dr. Dre is a very simple and smart guy. Hey, I got a new rapper. Just say what your name is so everyone knows who you are. Hi, this is my name. Okay, you're like the biggest name in rap now. In a way, it's sort of like Fight for Your Right. It was a breakthrough song that reached through to a white audience. It allowed a lot of, it had that sort of frat boy excitement because it was talking about sort of drugs and mischief. It had that sort of punk attitude towards it. But it also reflects the mental health crisis. Eminem always reflects the national health crisis, the mental health crisis, which is a national problem, and the substance abuse crisis. He has now been clean for, 10 years, I think. But he used to rap a lot about being addicted to pills and using drugs. And I think that's part of his power, is to reflect that back to us. Of course, his music is also violent. It is terribly homophobic, and it is very misogynist. A lot of these things are to be shocking, but a lot of these things are, the only word we can use is the word that is used in today's parlance, problematic. He also reflects a fear of young white men. There is a fear of young white men. Young white men are sometimes violent, sometimes dangerous, sometimes they're serial killers. Okay? That happens. Now, of course, there's Black serial killers as well. There's interesting I'll try and include a link to it, a video that's also about that, about the weird sort of racist tendency to always associate serial killers with white men. That's not the point of this video. But there is a certain kind of fear of young white men, which is different than the fear of young Black men. It comes from a different place. And in a lot of ways, he confronted America with his brand of scary. Not for nothing, but it was 4 months before Columbine. And if you don't know what Columbine was a school shooting. And it was the first school shooting that America took note of. The reaction that we should have to every single school shooting, which is to basically shut our country down and talk about nothing else for like months, was the reaction to that. Only 9/11 had a bigger effect on my life in terms of the news. Like the biggest news events in my life: number one, 9/11; number two, Columbine; number three, Donald Trump's election. I'd say as far as like what a big deal it was. And it's interesting, this kind of fear of angry young white men, and then the Columbine massacre happened just after. So we're going to listen to this a little bit. We're going to go through the lyrics. He's putting on this persona of Slim Shady, who is his alter ego, but who is also himself. We're going to listen to the song. I imagine you've heard the song before, but we are going to listen to it again anyway. Okay, so I didn't realize I had the edited version of the song. So a lot of things happening here. One is he's directly telling kids that they should do the things that he's doing. This was the era of like the TV show Jackass, this sense that American kids were impressionable, especially young white men, would just see something on TV and do it. And here he is directly telling them, do this, do acid, do drugs. I killed myself. You can think about killing yourself. Go for it. I'm useless and wasteless, and I like violence, and I like scariness. He was coming at this in a very, very aggressive way, while also having it be so catchy that right now you're sitting at home and you're going, ba-doo-boo, ba-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. Weird coincidence of history, the sample comes from a gay musician. So even though the song was initially much more homophobic, and also not for nothing, but the Beastie Boys were also very homophobic in their early days. They since apologized. But the original title of License to Ill was Don't Be an F Slur. So a different world had they gone with that album title. So this really sets Eminem off and establishes the template. You know, he's this guy who has a lot of talent, who has a different perspective, who has his own voice, and who absolutely sells records, because his next album will become the best-selling rap album of all time. Way to go, Marshall Mathers, with the Marshall Mathers LP. You know, his next album, but I do have to say, it doesn't hold the record anymore. Okay, so Eminem's a big deal, you know what I mean? But this is now actually the second best-selling rap album of all time, because 2 years later, Eminem released the Eminem Show, and that's the number one selling rap album of all time. Okay, that is how big of a deal Eminem was. Back-to-back albums, number one, number two. In case you're wondering, number three, Life After Death by Notorious B.I.G. Okay, but these are the number one and number two best-selling rap albums of all time. So obviously there is something to this, and we're going to get back to this question: did he steal rap? Is he Elvis? You know, and that's what makes Eminem so important. Is that not only is his cosign so important, the fact that he came up with Dr. Dre, that he came up with Proof, that he works with black rappers, that he made his bones, that he fought in the trenches of battle rapping, that when he was starting, and if you watch that video with Murs and Talib Kweli, you'll see the same thing. There was a time where being a white rapper was very difficult to get your foot in the door. People would, you know, throw pennies at you just for being white. Okay, they try to gatekeep you from entering into the sphere because of your whiteness. Okay, despite all that, he is very aware of the fact that his sales are due to the fact that he's white, that he's taking this artwork and he's turning it into something more acceptable. So in that album, in the song that I had you listen to, Without Me, he says, "No, I'm not the first king of controversy. I am the worst thing since Elvis Presley to do black music so selfishly and use it to get myself wealthy. Hey, here's a concept that works. 20 million other white rappers emerge, but no matter how many fish in the sea, be so empty without me." So he's directly addressing the Elvis question. He is mockingly saying that he is the worst thing since Elvis Presley, while he may also be thinking it as well. And the other thing is, it's true. A lot of other white rappers emerged, but nobody has really successfully challenged Eminem as the king of white rappers. Nobody has so completely taken over the rap scene since Eminem did in the early 2000s. That's like 20 years. I mean, we thought maybe Jack Harlow was going to do it, but he didn't. We thought maybe Post Malone was going to do it, but he didn't. No one can unseat Drake. Drake's just gonna sit up there just as long as he wants until he chooses to dethrone himself. I don't know. But perhaps more interestingly, on the song White America, he says this: "Look at these eyes, baby blue, baby, just like yourself. If they were brown, shady lose, shady sits on the shelf. But shady's cute, shady new, shady's dimples would help make the ladies swoon, baby, ooh, baby, look at my sales. Let's do the math. If I was black, I would have sold half. I ain't have to graduate from Lincoln High School to know that." This is actually insulting, because I would say if he were black, he would have sold a quarter, because he sold so many records. But still, he understands. He is addressing white privilege. He is benefiting from white privilege, but he is addressing it. Okay? And that's part of the reason why when black musicians or black hip-hop commentators look at Eminem, they don't just see him as a vampire, as a Vanilla Ice. So is he the 21st century rap king? Well, hip hop is a competitive art. So if he is the king, let's analyze how we have determined these other three rappers as the kings of 21st century rap. Well, if it's in terms of sales, of course Drake is the number one selling rap artist. Actually, he's number two. He's number two to Eminem. As far as influence goes, I mean, Kanye still got a beat. It's not even close. But Eminem is extraordinarily influential, not just on white rappers, but on other rappers as well. He is extraordinarily influential in the way that he writes. He's also a producer. He's also helped the art and make it more accepted by more people nationally and internationally. What about the final element? What was it again that made Kendrick perhaps the king of the 21st century? Is skill. And this is where it gets tricky. Is Eminem the best rapper? No, I hear you. I hear you. Half of you are saying, of course he is. Half of you are saying, how dare you even suggest it, you racist? It's a question. In my opinion, in my personal opinion, he's not even top five. That's my personal opinion. He is top five of the 21st century. He's a better rapper than Drake and Kanye, that's for sure, in terms of just his mic skills, you know. But there is an argument to be made. And what we're going to do now in class is we're going to Rap God was like three of you requested this song. Like I can't believe how many of you just love this song. So we're going to listen to and study the whole dang thing. Okay? That's what we're going to do. We're just going to watch a video and watch how he links together rhymes, how he creates this, how he just seems to take such unbelievable delight in how much he takes such delight in his mastery of the music and his mastery of rhymes. And the whole thing is in the context of rap being a competitive art and him essentially saying, I won. And that's what you have to say. If you don't think you are the best rapper, you should not be rapping. Okay. Let's take this frame by frame. Now, what's interesting here is he's addressing this idea of the rapidy rap. So one thing that Eminem is popular for is creating a kind of rapidy rap, which is a style of rapping that is hyper technical and hyper fast, and is often seen as being the opposite of flow, that it's just trying to be technical without being good. And the thing that Eminem is able to do that very few other artists are able to do is he does this rapidy rap style that's often called lyrical miracle, right? Where like it's just made to be dissected like this. I would say Eminem is on par with, say, Kendrick Lamar as somebody who's capable of dividing in syllables and going this way. I should mention Pack in the Mac in the back of the act is a line that he's intentionally quoting from Big Punisher, who someone wanted me to cover Big Punisher. We'll get to Big Punisher at the end of the video because that's anyways. So much like our analysis of Kendrick, it really does just show his extreme level of skill. And so this leaves us with this question, why is he the best-selling rapper? Well, why is he the most requested person in this class? Why is he? It's because he is relatable to the majority of the population. His description of lower class and middle class American life is more relatable to more Americans because there are more white Americans than other Americans, which is why it is a majority and not a minority. Discussing substance abuse is something which every demographic suffers from, but he's able to talk about it in a way that is relatable. Mental health problems, same thing. Family problems, especially the way that he talks about his mother and his wife and his ex-wife, even though he does it in the most spectacularly grotesque and horrific ways, it is relatable. The majority of Americans and the majority of this class, which is a majority not black class in terms of numbers, it all makes sense. It doesn't actually have to be a conspiracy. It can just be a simple question of numbers. And of course, he just happens to be super awesome. And nobody who listens to him rap can disagree with that. So as a final note here, I'm just going to go through a bunch of other white participants in rap music and sort of talk about where they might fit in this scheme. You know, Logic is someone who's in the limelight, and I would say a great blood donor, somebody who is able to give a lot to the music by bringing his own perspective. Mac Miller is able to do that in a very similar way. Unfortunately, he passed, but he was able to be himself, just be the kind of person that he was without having to try to take energy from other people. Mike Dean is one of the most important producers in rap history, who's behind a lot of Kanye's projects for the past 20 years. A lot of that influence from Kanye partly comes from his work with Mike Dean. That's somebody who's behind the scenes and is giving a lot. All the CEOs and board members and stockholders, I'll leave that up to you, you know? I mean, without them, there's not as much money in rap music. If there's less money in rap music, maybe there's less people who are able to do it. Maybe it's helpful. Maybe they're all vampires. Oh, there's a whole series of white producers in the underground rap scene who are making amazing rap music, amazing producers. Every single one of them that's listed here are some of the best rap producers of all time. And they're using their musical talent, their musical skill to create this music. And they're largely giving those to Black rap artists to be the front, to be there and making success. This is what I'm talking about, this sense of being a blood donor, of course, taking from, but also giving to the culture. International white rappers are a whole nother question. Akhenaten from France, or Blady from Sweden, or Oxymiron. Like sometimes when rap is taken out of the American context, they can be the voice of the voiceless, and sometimes that voice is white. Sometimes it's not, right? So it's another interesting question. Where do international rappers fit on the scheme at all? Logan Paul and Bad Baby is a perfect example of limelight vampires who do nothing to help the culture. LP is half of Run the Jewels. And I think it's interesting to take LP and Jack Harlow. I'm going to once again suggest that you watch The People's Party with Talib Kweli and Murs, because they've really discussed this really well. And also, if you've never seen it, Anthony Fantano and Sean C. Discussing, I'll include a link to that as well, where Sean C. has this whole white rappers are trash. And he explains his thinking, and he uses Jack Harlow as the example. Because he says that he doesn't do anything that a black rapper can't do just as well. He just does it while being white. That he's the perfect example of somebody who does not contribute. So that's interesting. You know, his take is very polemic. I think it's very interesting in this book, and it's something which I think we might have to talk about more in class, but the concept of sort of old race politics and new race politics, that the reality is a lot more nuanced than it used to be. And that to a certain extent, Sean C. represents that kind of old perspective on it, which is a lot more black and white. Post Malone, again, it's a very similar question. Does he just do what other black rappers do, but he's just white and that's why people like it? Or is he actually better at it? Or does he have his own skill at doing his kind of emo rap? Iggy Azalea, you saw in the video, I think it's a good example of somebody who is not of the culture but is using the culture. Macklemore is a whole nother question, because what do we even do? You know, he's somebody who addresses his privilege all the time, but when he won the Grammy instead of Kendrick Lamar and instead of Drake, it was like seen as one of the great moments where rap was about to be lost, where rap music was about to be stolen by white creators. But Macklemore released an album last year. No one's talking about it. They're too busy talking about Mr. Morale and Certified Lover Boy. Lil Dicky is a good example of someone who became a rapper only to become famous for something else, kind of like Bad Baby, kind of like Logan Paul, where rap is just a tool in their entertainment toolbox. MGK, I just had to put him on there. And me, your professor. Where do I fit in all this? You know, I don't know. Am I just taking, you know? Did I just take from this culture to create this minor? You know, once they sort of did away with the French program, did I just lob on to this art form, which is a subculture of Black American youth culture, and just take the fact that I like the music and I've studied it a little bit and just done that? Am I just extracting value from Black culture for my own personal benefit? On my YouTube channel? Am I just counting on the fact that if I talk about Kanye West or if I talk about Tyler the Creator, I'm going to get more clicks, which might eventually lead to monetary compensation or fame or some kind of success? The hope is, the desire is to be a blood donor, is to contribute to hip hop scholarship, is to diversify the curriculum at the school where I teach. That's the goal. But the first step towards progress is getting comfortable with uncomfortable truths. Okay? That's the issue. We just have to get comfortable with uncomfortable truths. And the uncomfortable truth is that all white participants in hip hop are to some extent vampires. We go back to Bakari Kitwana's statement about rap being hip hop, being a subculture of Black youth culture. By that very nature, to a certain extent, there's always going to be a certain amount, sometimes a lot. Sometimes it's Vanilla Ice and Logan Paul, and it's all vampire. Sometimes it's, I don't know, whoever it is that owns Warner Brothers Records, okay? That might be clear. But to a certain extent, even Eminem, even me are there. Which I promise I'd answer this question. Will rap be stolen from the Black community? I think it's possible, but I don't think it's probable because it hasn't happened. Because we've weathered Macklemore, we've weathered Post Malone, we've weathered Beastie Boys, we've weathered Eminem. White rappers have become a part of hip hop, but they have not taken over hip hop. In order for white rappers to take over hip hop, the white buying public needs to reject Black rap artists, which it simply has not done. They are buying more music made by Black rap artists now than they were before Eminem was big, than they were before the Beastie Boys were big. I'm going to end this on a positive note that we would have to let it happen. All of America would have to let it happen. White audiences would have to only support white rap artists the way that we only supported white rock and roll artists. But that just simply doesn't happen. It just hasn't happened. Black creators would have to abandon the art form, realizing that it no longer can speak for them because it has been so completely co-opted by people outside of their culture. That hasn't happened either. I talk all the time about rap being the greatest culture in the history of humanity. Like, truly, the summit of human creation is hip hop culture. I truly believe that. And this is part of the reason why, because it's the voice of the voiceless. And because it has not been taken away, and I don't think it can be. I do not think there is an Elvis out there waiting, because nobody wants an Elvis. At the most, we want an Eminem. Okay. There's class. How long was this? Jeez. Okay. Well, until next time, I'll see you all on Monday. How do I stop this? Hey, what'd you think, YouTube? Did you like the class? I hope you did. Sorry I had to cut out all of the little bit there, but got to make sure that everyone gets my corn. So until next time, there's the camera.